Eisenkoff. Once upon a time there lived an old man who had only one son, whom he loved dearly, but they were very poor and often had scarcely enough to eat. Then the old man fell ill, and things grew worse than ever. So he called his son to him and said, dear boy, I have no longer any fruit to give you. You must go into the world and get it for yourself. It does not matter what work you do, but remember, if you do it well and are faithful to your master, you will always have your reward. So Peter put a piece of black bread in his knapsack, and strapping it on his back, took a stout stick in his hand, and set out to seek his fortune. For a long while he traveled on, and nobody seemed to want him. But one day he met an old man, and being a polite youth, he took off his hat and said, "Good morning," in a pleasant voice. "Good morning," said the old man. "Where are you going?" "I'm wandering through the country trying to get work," replied Peter. "Well, then stay with me, for I can give you plenty," and said the old man, and Peter stayed. His work did not seem hard, for he had only 2 horses and a cow to see after, and though he had been hired for a year, the year consisted of but 3 days, so that it was not long before he received his wages. As payment, the old man gave him a nut, and he offered to keep him for another year, but Peter was homesick, and besides, he would rather have been paid ever a small piece of money than a nut, for he thought nuts grow on every tree, and I can gather as many as I like. However, he did not say this to the old man, who had been kind to him, and just bade him farewell. The nearer Peter grew to his father's house, the more ashamed he felt for having brought back such poor wages. What could one nut do for him? Why, it could not even buy a slice of bacon. There was no use taking it home. He might as well eat it. So he sat down on a stone and cracked it with his teeth, and then took it out of his mouth to break off the shell. But what? Who could ever guess what came out of that nut? Why, horses and oxen and sheep stepped out in such numbers that it seemed as if they would stretch out to the world's end. They gave Peter such a shock that he wrung his hands in dismay. What was he to do with all these creatures? Where was he to put them? He stood and gazed in terror, and at this moment Eisenkoff came by. "What's the matter, young man?" he asked. "Oh, my friend, there's plenty the matter," said Peter. "I have gained a nut for my wages, and when I cracked it open, this crowd of beasts came out, and I don't know what to do with them all." "Listen to me, son," said Eisenkopf. "If you will promise never to marry, I will drive them all back into the nut." In his trouble, Peter would have promised far harder things than this, so he gladly gave his prizes to Eisenkopf asked for, and at a whistle from the stranger, the animals began crowding into the nut again, nearly tumbling over each other in their haste. When the last foot got inside, the 2 halves of the nut shut close. Then Peter put it in his pocket and went on to his house. No sooner had he reached it than he cracked the nut for the second time, and out came the horses and sheep and oxen again. Indeed, Peter thought that even more of them than before. The old man could not believe his eyes when he saw the multitudes of horses, oxen, and sheep standing before the door. "How did you come by all these?" he gasped as soon as he could speak, and the son told him the whole story, and the promise he had given to Eisenkopf. The next day, some of the cattle were driven to the market and sold, and with the money the old man was able to buy some fields and gardens around his house. In a few months he had grown the richest and most prosperous man in the whole village. Everything seemed to turn to gold in his hands, till one day when he and his son were sitting in the orchard watching their herds of cattle grazing on the meadows, he suddenly said, "Peter, my boy, it's time for you to thinking about marrying." "But my father, I told you I can never marry because of the promise I gave to Eisenhoff." "Oh, one keeps promises here and there, and no one thinks of keeping such promises. If Eisenkoff does not like you marrying, then he should put up with it all the same. Besides, there stands in the stable a gray horse which is saddled night and day, and if Eisenkopf should show his face, you've only got to jump on the horse's back and ride away. Nobody on earth could catch you. When all is safe, you can come back again, and we shall live happily as two fish in the sea. And it so happened the young man found a pretty brown-skinned girl who was willing to have him for a husband. The whole village came to the wedding feast. The music was its gayest, and the dance was its merriest, and Eisenkoff looked in the window. "Oh, dear brother, what's going on here? It has the air of being a wedding feast, yet I fancied, was I mistaken, that you had given me a promise that you would never marry." But Peter had not waited for the end of his speech. Scarcely had he seen Eisenkopf that he darted like the wind to the stable and flung himself on the horse's back. In another moment he was away over the mountain, with Eisenkopf running fast behind him. On they went through the thick forest where the sun never shone, over rivers so wide that it took a whole day to sail across them, up hills whose sides were all of glass, and on they went 7 times in 7 countries, till Peter reined in his horse before the house of an old woman. "Good day, mother," he said, jumping down and opening the door. "Good day, my son," answered she. "And what are you doing here at the world's end?" "I'm flying for my life, mother, flying to the world which is beyond all worlds, for Eisenkopf is at my heels." "Come in and rest then, and have some food, for I have a little dog who will begin to howl when Eisenkopf is still 7 miles off." So Peter went in and warmed himself, and ate and drank, till suddenly the dog began to howl. "Quick, my son, you must go!" cried the old woman, and the lightning itself was not quicker than Peter. "Stop a moment!" cried the old woman again, just as he was mounting the horse. "Take this napkin and this cake, and put them in your bag, where you can get hold of them easily." Peter took them and put them into his bag, and waving his thanks for her kindness, he was off like the wind. Round and round he rode, through 7 times 7 countries, through forests still thicker, and rivers still wider, and mountains still more slippery than the others he had passed, till at length he reached the house where dwelt another. "Good day, mother," he said. "Good day, my son. Why are you seeking here at the world's end?" "I'm flying for my life, mother, flying to the world that is beyond worlds, for Eisenkopf is at my heels." "Come in, my son, and have some food. I have a little dog who will begin to howl when Eisenkopf is still 7 miles off. So lie on this bed and rest yourself in peace." Then she went to the kitchen and baked a number of cakes, more than Peter could have eaten in a whole month. He had not finished a quart of them when the dog began to howl. "Now, my son, you must go," cried the old woman. "But first put these cakes and this napkin in your bag, where you can easily get them." So Peter thanked her, and off again he was like the wind. On he rode through 7 times 7 countries, till he came to a house of a third old woman, who welcomed him as the others had done. But when the dog howled and Peter sprang up, she said, as she gave him the same gifts of the journey, "Now you have 3 cakes and 3 napkins, for I know that my sisters have each given you one. Listen to me and do as I tell you. Ride 7 days and nights straight before you, and on the 8th morning you will be seeing a great fire. Strike it 3 times with the 3 napkins, and it will part in 2. Then ride into the opening, and when you are in the middle of the opening, throw the 3 cakes behind your back with your left hand." Peter thanked her for her counsel, and was careful to do exactly all the old woman had told him. On the 8th morning he reached the fire so large that he could see nothing else on either side. But when he struck it with the napkins, it parted, and stood on each hand on the wall. He rode through the opening. He threw the cakes behind him. From each cake there sprang a huge dog, and gave them the names of World's Weight, Iron Strong, and Quick Ear. They bayed with joy at the sight of him, and Peter had turned to pat them. He beheld Eisenhoff at the edge of the fire, but the opening had closed up behind Peter, and he could not get through. "Stop, you promise breaker!" he shrieked. "You have slipped through my hands once, but I will catch you again!" Then he lay down by the fire and waited to see what would happen. When Peter knew that he had nothing more to fear of Eisenkoff, he rode on slowly till he came to a small white house. Here he entered and found himself in a room where a gray-haired woman was spinning, and a beautiful girl was sitting in the window, combing her golden hair. "What brings you here, my son?" asked the old woman. "I am seeking a place, mother," answered Peter. "Stay with me, for I need a servant," said the old woman. "With pleasure, mother," he replied. After that, Peter's life was a very happy one. He sowed and plowed all day, except now and then when he took his dogs and went to hunt. And whatever game he brought back, the maiden with the golden hair knew how to dress it. One day the old woman had gone to the town to buy some flour, and Peter and the maiden were left alone in the house. They fell into talk, and she asked him where his home was and how he managed to come through the fire. Peter then told her the whole story, and of his striking the flames with the 3 napkins as he had been told to do. The maiden listened attentively and wondered in herself whether that what he said was true. So after Peter had gone out to the fields, she crept up to his room and stole the napkins, and then set off as fast as she could to the fire by the path she knew over the hill. At the 3rd blow she gave, the flames divided, and Eisenkoff, who had been watching and hoping for a chance of this kind, ran down the opening and stood before her. At this sight the maiden was almost frightened to death, but with a great effort she recovered herself and ran home as fast as her legs would carry her, closely pursued by Eisenkoff. Panting for breath, she rushed into the house and fell fainting to the floor, but Eisenkoff entered behind her and hid himself in the kitchen underneath the hearth. Not long after, Peter came in and picked up the 3 napkins which the maiden had dropped on the threshold. He wondered how they got there, for he knew he had left them in his room. But what to his horror when he saw the form of the fainting girl lying where she had dropped, as still and white as if she had been dead. He lifted her up and carried her to her bed, where he soon revived, but she did not tell Peter about Eisenkoff, who had been almost crushed to death under the hearthstone by the body of World's Weight. Next morning, Peter locked up his dogs and went into the forest, alone. Eisenkoff, however, had seen him go and followed so closely at his heels that Peter had barely time to clamber up a tall tree where Eisenkoff could not reach him. "Come down at once, you gallows bird!" he cried. "Have you forgotten your promise that you would never marry?" "Oh, I know it is all up with me," answered Peter, "but let me call out 3 times." "You can call 100 times if you'd like. Now I've got you in my power, and you shall pay for what you have done." "Armstrong, World's Weight, Quick Ear, fly to my help!" cried Peter. And Quick Ear heard, and said to his brothers, "Listen, Master's calling us." "You're dreaming, fool," answered World's Weight. "Why has he not finished breakfast?" And he gave Quick Ear a slap with his paw, for he was young and needed to be taught sense. "Armstrong, World's Weight, Quick Ear, quick fly to my help!" This time, World's Weight also heard, and he said, "Now Master's really calling." "Oh, silly you are," answered Ironstrong. "You know at this hour he's always eating." And he gave World's Weight a cuff, because he was old enough to know better. Peter sat trembling in the tree, dreading lest his dogs had never heard, or else that, having heard, they refused to come. It was his last chance, so making a mighty effort, he shrieked once more, "Ironstrong, World's Weight, Quick Ear, fly to my help, or I am a dead man!" And Ironstrong heard, and said, "Yes, he is certainly calling. We must go at once." In an instant he had burst open the door, and all 3 were bounding away in the direction of his voice. When they reached the foot of the tree, Peter said, "Adam!" And in a few minutes there was nothing left of Eisenkoff. As soon as his enemy was dead, Peter got down and returned to the house, where he bade farewell to the old woman and her daughter, who gave him a beautiful ring all set with diamonds. It was really a magic ring, but neither Peter nor the maiden knew that. Peter's heart was heavy as he set out for home. He had ceased to love his wife with whom he had left his wedding feast, and his heart had gone out for the golden-haired girl. However, it was no use thinking that, so he rode forward steadily. The fire had to be passed through before he had gone very far, and when he came to it, Peter shook the 3 napkins in the flames, and the passage opened for him. Then a curious thing happened. The 3 dogs who had followed at his heels all this way now became 3 cakes again, which Peter put into his bag with the napkins. After that, he stopped at the houses of the 3 old women and gave each one back her napkin and her cake. "Where's my wife?" asked Peter when he got home. "My dear son, why did you leave us? After you vanished, no one knew where, your poor wife grew more and more wretched, and would neither eat nor drink. Little by little she faded away, and a month later we laid her in a grave to hide the sorrows under the earth." At this news, Peter began to weep, for he had loved his wife before he went away and had seen the golden-haired maiden. He went sorrowfully about his work for the space of half a year, when one night he dreamed that he moved the diamond ring given to him by the maiden from his left hand and put it on the wedding finger on his right. The dream was so real that he awoke at once and changed the ring from one hand to the other, and as he did so, guess what he saw? Why, the golden-haired maiden standing before him. He sprang up and kissed her and said, "Now you are mine forever and ever, and when we die we'll both be buried in one grave." And so they were.